My name is Prudence Nash, and I was 35 years old the night my mother put my name card at the children's table. I was standing inside the door of a converted grain mill with 200 guests moving past me, holding a piece of cream cardstock with my own name on it in my mother's best handwriting. Under the name, it said Table 19. Table 19 was shoved up against the kitchen doors. Paper napkins, 6 kids, a box of crayons from the venue. My mother arrived at my shoulder while I was still reading the card, and she did not bother to lower her voice much. You didn't bring a +1, so you don't count as an adult. Then she went back to the head table to fix my brother's boutonniere. I sat down with the 7-year-olds and I ate my chicken. What happened 40 minutes later is the reason 200 people put their forks down at the same time. And what I did after that is the reason my mother has not spoken to me since. Welcome back to Wise Family Revenge. This is where we sit with the quiet stories, the ones about women who stopped asking permission, and the families who never saw it coming. Drop a comment and be sure to subscribe. 6 weeks before the wedding, on a Tuesday, a brick wall came down on a 19-year-old named Cody Reyes. He was standing in the wrong spot on a demolition job outside Ashford. They brought him in at 6:40 in the evening with a flailed chest and a blood pressure that kept sliding. I run the trauma bay the way you run a kitchen on a Saturday night. Short sentences. One voice. 2 units now. Chest tube right side. Somebody call the OR and tell them I'm coming up in 4 minutes. 6 people did exactly what I said, and none of them asked me who I was, because in that room, the only question anybody cares about is what's bleeding. Cody kept his lung and most of his week. I wrote the note at 10. I drove back to my apartment on Ridley Street, ate cold rice standing at the counter with the light off, and looked at a phone with no messages on it. That is not a sad detail. That is just the arithmetic of a job where the people who need you never know your name afterward, and the people who know your name have stopped asking. I had been an attending for 3 years. I paid off my last student loan in March. I owned a car, a condo, and 11 pairs of the same black scrub pants. At 11:15 my brother called. Danny is 6 years younger than me and he calls twice a year, once at Christmas and once when something has gone sideways. It was August. I looked at his name lighting up the screen and I felt the thing I always feel, which is not annoyance. It is closer to relief. He needed something, which meant there was a way in. The venue wants the rest of it by the 15th, Danny said. He talked fast, the way he does when he has rehearsed. The Grove at Harrowfield needed $22,000. The Vances had already paid their half in June, and Sloane's parents could not find out that the Nash half was short. It's a loan, he said. Obviously, it's a loan. I opened my banking app while he was still explaining. I did not ask what happened to the money he had put aside. I did not ask when he planned to pay it back, or whether Mom knew, or why a man who works as an estimator cannot estimate his own wedding. I typed the amount, confirmed it with my thumbprint, and told him it was sent. It took 11 seconds. He went quiet for a second and said, "You're serious," and I said, "Check your phone." And then he laughed and said I was the best, and I stood in my dark kitchen with cold rice in a bowl and I felt good. That is the part I want you to hear. Not the money. The feeling. $22,000 left my account and something in my chest unclenched, because for about 90 seconds I was necessary, and being necessary was the only currency I had ever been able to spend in that family. I had done it 3 times before. There was the transmission in the spring, there was the deposit on his first apartment, there was the emergency room bill from the year he broke his wrist skateboarding at 26, which he did not want Mom to see. I never counted them out loud, but I knew where each one sat, the way you know where a bruise is under a sleeve. My mother's dining room table had not been used for food since 2011. It is her workroom, Loretta Nash occasions, hand lettering and event seating, 16 years in business, and half the weddings and charity dinners in Cedar Hill go through that table first. When I came by on Labor Day weekend, the whole surface was covered in cream cardstock laid out in a grid, and she was working with the good nib, the one she keeps in a felt sleeve. She does not write names. She composes them. She will spend 9 minutes on the capital letter of a woman she does not like. Sit, she said, without looking up. Don't touch the wet ones. I sat. I watched her hands, which are beautiful and steady and 63 years old, and I thought about how much of my childhood was spent on the other side of that table waiting to be looked at. She asked me the question in the middle of a letter, the way she asks all her real questions. Who are you bringing? I said nobody. She did not sigh. She did not lecture me. She reached into the stack on her left, found one card without looking for it, and moved it to a separate pile by her elbow, and then she went back to the letter she was in the middle of. Well, she said, a table is just a list of who's real? She said it pleasantly. She said it the way you would explain that white wine goes with fish. I remember laughing, because at the time it sounded like one of her lines, the kind she uses at church committee meetings to end an argument. I did not see where she put my card. That was the whole point. 2 days later, my chief of surgery caught me in the stairwell between the 4th and 5th floors, which is where he says everything that matters. The medical executive committee had put my name forward for trauma medical director. Ashford Regional is a level 2 center trying very hard to become a level 1, and the director runs the program, the registry, the verification, the whole ugly, beautiful machine of getting people from a county road to an operating room alive. It came with protected administrative time and a stipend of $48,000. It came with something I wanted more than either. It came with a chair in a room where decisions get made about how people in this county live and die. The board votes to ratify on the 21st of October. It's you or Grant, my chief said. Grant Whitlock is 52, has more publications than I have shifts, and is the kind of man who calls board members at home to talk about their grandchildren. He's already working the phones, my chief said. You should be working the phones. I told him I would let the file speak for itself. He looked at me the way you look at somebody who has just told you they don't believe in weather. I meant it though. I had spent 14 years being the person who did the work and let the work be the argument, because the work was the one thing in my life nobody had ever handed me. My mother could not seat me out of a trauma bay. That was the deal I had made with myself at 22, and it had held. On the 21st of October, I was going to find out what it was worth. The invitation proof came to my email because Danny wanted somebody to check the spelling of my name, which my mother had gotten wrong on the save the dates. Prudence Nash. Correct this time. Under it, in smaller type, daughter of Beatrice and Walter Vance. Sloane Vance. I had known my future sister-in-law's name for 14 months, and I had never once put it next to a chart. I was in the parking garage on level 3 with my keys in my hand, and I stopped walking. Vance. I called Danny from the stairwell landing and made my voice sound like nothing. I asked about Sloane's parents, whether they were the kind of people who wanted a speech from the groom's side. B's the one who runs everything, he said. Walt's quiet. He rolled a truck a few years back, out past Bell Ridge, real bad one, but he's fine now. He golfs. I stood there with my thumb on the rail. Bell Ridge is County Road 9 miles out, and everything that happens on it comes to us. Vance, Walter, 61. I could see the board in my head, the way you can see a room you only stood in once. I could see the number on the transfusion cooler. I did not say any of that to my brother. I said something about the font on the invitation and I hung up and I sat down on the concrete step in level 3 of the parking garage for a while. 200 and some patients a year go through my hands. I do not remember faces. I remember names in charts. And I remember the ones where I had to go out to the family room and pick my words like I was picking through glass. His was one of those. On the 24th of September, I wrote to the compliance officer. I want to be clear about this part because people always want to know why a smart woman walks into something. I did not walk into it blind. I sat at my kitchen table at 6 in the morning with coffee I had already let go cold, and I wrote it out plainly. My brother is marrying the daughter of a man I believe was a trauma patient of mine 3 years ago. His wife chairs the board of this hospital. My name is in front of that board on the 21st of October. Please advise. I read it 3 times before I sent it, and I took out the word believe and then put it back, because I did believe, and I did not know. What I did not do was look. I could have opened the chart in 9 seconds from any workstation in the building and confirmed the whole thing. There is no clinical reason for me to be in Walter Vance's record. There has not been for 3 years. People lose their licenses for that. And more to the point, it is a thing you simply do not do. The way you do not read a stranger's mail because the envelope was interesting. So I sat, with not knowing. I ran that day. I ran the day after. Every time the thought surfaced, I put it where I put everything, which is under the next task, and the next task, and the next one after that. Which is a system that works beautifully until the day it doesn't. It took compliance 5 days to answer me. In those 5 days, I thought about that family room maybe 40 times. Before any of that, in August, there had been the engagement party, and the engagement party had a school bus in it. On the 16th, a driver had a syncopal episode on the state route and put a middle school activity bus into the ditch on its side. 6 of them came to us. 2 were serious. One was a 12-year-old girl with a liver laceration who I stood over for 3 hours and 40 minutes. Nobody died. That is the whole headline, and it is a good one. I texted my mother at 4:12 in the afternoon, before we knew how bad it was going to be, and I said I would not make the party. She called back at 10 that night, and I listened to the voicemail in the parking lot with my hair still flat from the cap. Her voice was warm. Her voice is always warm. That is the thing nobody understands about her from the outside. Everyone asked about you, she said. I told them you were busy, again. Then something about the Vances being lovely and the caterer being a disappointment, and love you, and goodbye. Not one question about what had happened, not whether anyone had been killed, not whether the girl made it, not what it does to a person to stand in a room like that, and then walk out to a car in the dark. It would have cost her one sentence. I want to be fair to her. She has never once understood what I do, and she has never once been curious about it. And after a certain number of years, those two facts stop being separate things. I drove back to Ashford that night and I did not tell anyone about the girl either. Compliance answered on the 29th. It was 4 lines. In-law relationships by marriage of a sibling do not constitute a reportable conflict under the policy. No recusal indicated at this time. Disclose if an issue arises. I printed it and put it in the folder where I keep the paperwork of my own life, which is thin. I remember feeling relieved, and I remember the relief being a little too fast, the way relief is when you have asked a question you did not want answered honestly. That same night my mother called about the seating chart. She was pleasant and efficient. I need a name for your card, sweetheart. Bring anybody. Bring that woman from your gym. Bring a friend from work. I don't care if he's married, I just need a name to write. I asked her why the number mattered so much. She said the number did not matter, the shape of the room mattered, and a woman alone at a round table of 8 throws the whole thing off. I said, I was not going to rent a person for an evening so she would have something to let her. I said it lightly. I even laughed. She let a silence sit there, and then she said, in the same tone she uses to say, the shrimp are fine. Well, then I'll arrange it myself. I said okay. That was my mistake, and it was not a stupid one. And I want you to see the difference. I knew exactly who she was. I had known for 35 years. What I believed was that whatever she did would be small and survivable, and mine to absorb quietly, the way I had absorbed every other version of it. I had no idea she would put it in writing. I got to the rehearsal dinner at 9:40 on Friday night. I had a bowel resection that went long, and I changed in my car in the lot of the Cedar Hill Inn, and I still smelled faintly of chlorhexidine when I walked into the private room at Marchetti's. They had cleared the plates. The staff were stacking chairs at the far end. My mother saw me come in, raised her glass in a way that included me and excused her from speaking to me, and turned back to the club president's wife. Danny waved from across the room and did not cross it. I ate a dinner roll standing near the door, and I want to tell you I was fine, and mostly I was, because I have eaten a lot of meals standing up. Sloane found me. She is 27, teaches 2nd grade, and has the kind of face that makes children confess things. She took both my hands and said she was so glad, and that she had heard I was the reason the venue got paid, which told me a great deal about my brother's ability to keep a secret and nothing good about him. Then she said, "My mom has been wanting to meet you for 3 years." I heard it. I filed it in the part of my brain that handles things I will get to later. Somebody called her for a photograph and she went, and I stood there with a piece of bread in my hand and I thought, 3 years is a strange thing to say about a woman you met last spring. My mother's laugh came across the room, bright and social. Beatrice Vance had gone back to her hotel at 8. I would not meet her for almost another day. Danny was smoking behind the restaurant, which he quit 4 years ago and which our mother does not know about. He looked 12 years old in his good jacket. He said, "Thank you for the money," finally, in the dark where nobody could hear him say it. And then he said the other thing, which is the reason I remember the smell of that alley. "Tomorrow. Just don't make it a thing, okay?" I asked him what there was to make a thing of. He looked at the wall over my shoulder. He said Mom had shown him the layout on Wednesday. He said she had her reasons, that the Prescotts had come in late and something had to give, and the room only holds so many. He said the word temporary. A seating chart is not temporary. It is printed on a board and displayed on an easel at the door so that 200 people can read it while they hand over their coats. My brother knew for 3 days. He had my $22,000 in his venue's account, and he knew for 3 days. And what he chose to do with that knowledge was ask me in advance not to react. I asked him one question. I asked if he was ever going to pay me back. He dropped his cigarette and stepped on it and said, "That's not fair," and went inside. It was the closest thing to an answer I ever got, and I never brought it up again, and neither did anyone in my family, ever, which is its own kind of accounting. I drove the 4 minutes back to the inn. I set an alarm. I lay on top of the covers in my clothes for a while first. Here is the night I had been not thinking about since the parking garage, the 2nd of March, 3 years earlier. I was 32 and not yet a year into being an attending, which means you are the one who says the thing out loud and there is nobody behind you. A pickup rolled out past Bell Ridge at 11 at night and came in at 11:40 with a splenic laceration, a hemothorax, and a pressure of 70 over palp. Massive transfusion protocol. 19 units before we were done. I had my hands inside a 61-year-old man for 2 hours, and I did not think about him as a person once, because thinking about them as people is a thing you do afterward. In the hallway, with your back against the wall. At 2:15 in the morning, I walked into the family consultation room in the shield and the cap, and told a woman I could not really see, because the lights in there are kept low and I had been awake for 19 hours, that her husband had been salvageable. That is a word we use. It is a good word in a trauma registry, and a monstrous word in a small room at 2 in the morning, and I heard it come out of my own mouth and I stopped. I said, "I'm sorry. Let me say that again. He's going to make it." She made a sound. Somebody caught her arm. I do not remember her face. I remember the sound and I remember thinking, with the flat clarity you get at hour 19, that in my job, we do not ask who a person belongs to. We ask what's bleeding. 3 weeks later, an envelope came to the department addressed to me by name. I put it in my locker. It is still there. People are going to want to know about the +1, so let me deal with it. His name was Theo. He builds cabinets. We were together 4 years and he moved out 14 months before the wedding, and he did not cheat, and he did not yell, and there was no scene at all, which is somehow worse. He packed on a Sunday. He said one true thing on his way out, and he said it kindly, which is the part that still gets me. "You're never not on call." I wanted to argue. I stood in the doorway of my own apartment building an argument in my head, and I could not find a single piece of evidence for my side. I had missed his father's memorial. I had taken Christmas so a resident with a newborn wouldn't have to. I had answered the phone during dinner 300 times, and never once said no, and I had told myself every time that it was because someone might die, which was true, and which was also the most beautiful hiding place ever invented. You cannot be accused of running away when you are running toward a bleeding person. My mother put my aloneness on a card at table 19, and she was cruel about it, and she was not entirely wrong about the fact of it, and both of those things are allowed to be true. I know some of you are hearing this and thinking about a chair you sat in once, a folding one maybe, near a kitchen door. If you are, tell me the room in the comments. I read them. And if you want the rest of this night, stay with me and subscribe, because the part I'm about to tell you is the part I still think about. The wedding was Saturday, the 11th of October, at St. Brendan's at 11 in the morning. I was in row 4. Rows 1 through 3 were my mother, my Aunt Corinne, my cousin Renee and her daughter, and the Prescotts, who own the club and who are not related to anybody. I held my mother's purse through the entire ceremony because she does not like a bag on her arm in photographs, and I want to be honest about the fact that I offered. Nobody made me. That is how it works. You get so used to being the useful one that you start preloading the requests to save everybody the trouble. Sloane came up the aisle and my brother's face came apart. He is not a strong man, but he loves her, plainly and completely, and when he cried, I cried, and there was nothing complicated in it. I was happy. I need you to hold on to that, because everything after this gets sharp, and it would be easy to think I went into that reception looking for a fight. I did not. I went in holding a purse and a program and a genuine feeling of gladness for my brother. Afterward, there were photographs on the church steps. The photographer arranged us by height, and my mother rearranged us by something else, and I ended up at the end of the second row, half behind Renee. Then everybody went to their cars for the 2-mile drive to the Grove, and my mother said, 6 o'clock, don't be late, the chart's on the easel. The reception started at 6. My name was already somewhere I had not seen yet. The Grove at Harrowfield is a grain mill from 1902 with the machinery taken out and round tables put in. And the floor is original hardwood, which means every chair leg you drag makes a sound the whole room can hear. Remember that. The seating board stood on an easel by the door with every name at that reception on it in my mother's hand. I did the thing everybody does. I looked for myself at the tables near the front. Table 3, the family table, had my mother, Corinne, the Prescotts, Renee, and her husband. Table 7 had cousins. Table 11 had the church people. I found my name at the bottom of the board and read the number twice, because I assumed I had misread it. Table 19. I walked the length of the room to get there, past 18 tables of linen and gold chairs, and table 19 was a smaller round shoved up against the swinging kitchen doors, set with paper napkins and plastic-stemmed cups and padded folding chairs, and it had 6 children at it between the ages of 5 and 9. My mother came up at my shoulder while I was still holding the card. You didn't bring a +1, so you don't count as an adult. Pleasant. Reasonable. The voice she uses for the shrimp. Across the room, my cousin Renee turned around in her chair and looked at me, and then looked away fast, and that was the only acknowledgement I got from an adult for the next 40 minutes. I sat down. Next to me was Mabel Doyle, who is 7 and Renee's daughter, and Mabel's place card did not have her name on it at all. It said, guest. She held it up and asked me why hers didn't say anything. I turned my own card over, took the red crayon out of the venue's little box, and printed on the back, Mabel Doyle, trauma doctor. I stood it up against her water glass. She looked at it for a long time. I ate my chicken, all of it, and the green beans, and the roll, because I had operated for 6 hours the day before, and skipped lunch, and I was not going to add hunger to the evening. I cut a 5-year-old's meat into pieces. I answered whether I had ever seen a real bone. And I said yes, and Mabel asked what it looked like. And I said like the inside of a chicken wing but smoother, and 3 of them went quiet in a way that meant I had made a friend for life. At one point, a boy asked why I was at their table if I was a grown-up, and I said the room ran out of chairs, and he accepted that completely because 7-year-olds understand furniture shortages. Aunt Corinne came over halfway through the entrees carrying a plate of the appetizers that had been passed at the adult tables, and set it down in front of me, and squeezed my shoulder and said, "So you don't feel left out." Then she went back to table 3. I thanked her, and I did not eat them. There is a specific flavor to being pitied by someone who will not give up their own seat, and I had eaten enough of it in my life to recognize it on sight. From the head table, my mother was laughing at something the club president said. She was radiant. She had built the room, and the room was working. She did not look toward the kitchen doors, not once, not for 4 courses. And I understood that this was not avoidance. It was completion. She had put every name where it belonged. A table is just a list of who's real, and mine was written on the back of a crayon drawing, propped against a plastic cup next to a 7-year-old. My phone buzzed against my leg during the salad course. My chief of surgery, at 7:52 on a Saturday night, which meant he had been thinking about it in his kitchen and could not hold it until Monday. Board ratifies the 21st. Whitlock spent the week calling people. 2 of them told me, "You need to make some calls." I sat at a table of children in a converted grain mill and read that twice. Somewhere in Ashford, a man in a golf shirt was on his 4th phone call of the week, telling a retired banker about his granddaughter's college applications, and then mentioning, lightly, near the end, that the trauma program needed a steady hand. And here I was, in the seat the room had assigned me, eating chicken with the kids and letting the file speak for itself. I started typing a reply. Something about outcomes data, and the verification survey, and the 2 years I had spent rebuilding the registry after the last director let it rot. I got about halfway and deleted it. Not because I was above it, because I could feel exactly what I was doing, which was reaching for the same currency I had been spending my whole life. Look how useful I am. Look how much I carried. Pay me in a chair. I put the phone face down under my napkin. Mabel asked me who it was, and I said it was work. And she asked if somebody was dying, and I said no, sweetheart. Somebody is just counting. She thought that was funny. She had no idea how funny it was. Neither did I yet. There were 2 members of the Ashford Regional Board of Directors sitting in that room, 40 feet from me, and I did not know it. I decided to leave during the cake cutting. It was a clean decision, and I made it the way I make decisions at work, which is fast and without a lot of feeling attached. Stay and be furniture, or go back to the inn, sleep, and drive to Ashford in the morning. Nobody at table 3 would notice before dessert. My mother would tell people I had been called in, and for once the lie would be a kindness to us both. I got up. I walked to the coat check in the front hall, where the noise of the room drops off and you can hear the ice machine. I gave the girl my ticket. She had my jacket in her hand and I had my hand out for it. And I looked back through the doorway at table 19, because I had not said goodbye to the kids. Mabel was copying the word doctor off the back of my place card onto a paper napkin in red crayon. She had the tip of her tongue out. She had gotten as far as DOC. And I understood that if I walked out of that building, the last thing that child would learn from the evening was that the woman at the kids' table waited until nobody was looking and then left. Because that is what you do when the room tells you what you are. That is the whole lesson, delivered clean, no words required. My mother had taught it to me at that exact age with a folding chair and a smile. I told the girl I had changed my mind. I gave her back the ticket and she hung the jacket up again, and I walked back across the room to table 19 and sat down. At 8:15, my mother took the microphone, and she was good. She is always good. She talked about the first time Danny brought Sloane to the house, and about Walter fixing the porch light without being asked, and she got a laugh from 200 people twice. She said, "Both of my children," once, near the beginning, in a list of blessings. Then she spent 4 minutes on my brother. Sophomore year, the game against Kearns, the night he came home and put a house key on the counter and said it was his. Her voice went thick and real, and the room went with her, because she meant it. And that is the thing about my mother that makes her impossible to explain to people who have only heard the bad parts. She loves him. It is not performance. When she got to me, she said, "And his sister's always so busy." Warm. Fond. The room laughed a little, comfortably. The way you laugh at a shared harmless fact, and moved on with her to the toast. At table 19, a boy named Teddy leaned over and asked me if I was really that busy, and I said, "Pretty busy." And he said, My dad says busy means you don't want to. I ate a bite of cake. Up at the head table, one person was not laughing. A woman in navy, 60s, straight-backed, sitting 2 seats down from the bride, and she had turned in her chair, and she was not looking at my mother at the microphone. She was looking down the length of the room at the table by the kitchen doors. At me. She had been looking for a while. I did not know who she was. I want that on the record, because of everything that came after. I had never met the mother of the bride. I had missed the engagement party for a school bus, a summer dinner for a colleague whose son had croup, and half the rehearsal dinner for a resection, and Beatrice Vance had gone back to the hotel before I arrived. 14 months of an engagement and our paths had missed each other 3 separate times, which sounds impossible until you have worked a call schedule. Renee came over to table 19 with a glass of wine she was not going to give me and crouched down by my chair to say something sympathetic, and I asked her who the woman in navy was. Sloane's mom, she said. B. She's a piece of work in a good way, I guess. She's on some board. Then she said, "Are you okay?" And I said I was fine. And she went back to table 3, because that is what people do, and I have stopped holding it against them. Up front, Beatrice Vance said something to her husband. Walter nodded once. She put her napkin on the table, squared it with 2 fingers, and stood up. The jazz trio was 3 bars into something soft. She stepped away from the head table and started walking, not toward the bar and not toward the restrooms, but down the long, open lane between the tables, in heels, on an original hardwood floor, in a room where every chair leg makes a sound. By the 4th table, people had started to turn. She walked the whole length of that ballroom, 18 tables. I counted them later, when I was trying to understand the shape of the thing, but at the time all I knew was that it was taking a long time and that the room was getting quieter in a wave that moved just ahead of her. People do not stop talking all at once. It rolls, table by table, a beat behind wherever she is, until the trio notices and drops the volume, and then the sound of the room is one woman's shoes. My mother was still standing near the microphone with the toast finished in her hand. I watched her track Beatrice across the floor, and I watched her face do the calculation. And the calculation came out wrong, because she smiled and started to move to intercept her, the way a hostess does. Beatrice went past her without slowing down. She came to table 19. She looked at the 6 children and at the paper napkins and at the plastic cups, and something happened in her jaw. Then she took hold of the back of the padded folding chair beside me, pulled it out, and sat down in it, in a navy dress, at the children's table, and set her hands on the paper cloth. Up close she was 64, and tired around the eyes and completely composed. She leaned in maybe 6 inches, so that what she said was for me and not for the room. "March," she said. 2:15 in the morning. I put down my fork. "You had the shield on," she said. "You said he was salvageable, and then you stopped. And you said, 'I'm sorry. Let me say that again. He's going to make it.'" Her voice did not do anything dramatic. It was the voice of a woman reciting something she has said to herself in the car. I have thought about that correction every day for 3 years. You gave me the honest word, and then you gave me the human one. And you were 20 seconds late realizing I was a person, and no one has ever done anything kinder to me in my life. I told her I remembered the night. I told her, because it was true, and because she deserved the whole of it, that I did not remember her face, and that the lights in that room are low on purpose. She waved it off like a woman who has already thought that through. She said she had written to me 3 weeks later. I told her the envelope was in my locker, unopened, and that I do not open letters from families, and that I could not have told you why until that exact second, sitting at a children's table with a crayon place card by my elbow. It is because a thank you is a thing somebody gives you, and I did not know how to be given things. Then she said the other part. She said her name was Beatrice Vance, and she chaired the board of directors of Ashford Regional Medical Center. I understood 2 things at once. The second one went through me like cold water. She was already getting up. "You don't know who you are in this room," she said. "Let me tell them." I said, "Please don't." I said it fast and quietly, and I meant it more than I have meant most things, and she was already standing. And she did not hear me. Or she heard me, and had spent 3 years deciding not to. She took the microphone out of the MC's hand the way board chairs take things, which is without asking and without apology. The trio stopped. 200 people who had been told there would be dancing looked up. "I'm going to be brief," she said, "because I've had 2 glasses of wine and my daughter will kill me." A laugh. Easy. The room in her hand in 4 seconds. 3 years ago, my husband rolled his truck out past Bell Ridge. Some of you sent food. Walter, at the head table, put his hand flat on the tablecloth. The surgeon who ran that room that night is sitting at the table by the kitchen doors, eating dinner with the children, and I have been trying to shake her hand for 3 years. She did not look at my mother. That is the part I keep coming back to. She did not need to. I'm not going to make a speech. I just wanted every person in this room to know who they're having dinner with tonight. The sound a large room makes when it stops eating all at once is not silence. It is 100 small sounds ending. Forks down on china, chairs shifting, one woman saying "oh" at the far end. Then Walter Vance stood up. Then his whole table. Then half the room. If you've made it this far, you already know the room changed. Here is what I need you to hear before I tell you the rest. What happens next is not the good part. It looked like the good part. Stay with me and subscribe, because I tell these all the way to the end, including the parts that don't flatter me. Then the room did what rooms do. The banquet captain appeared out of nowhere with 2 servers behind him, which is how you know a venue is good, and there was a quiet conversation near the head table, and then a chair was carried up from somewhere, and a place setting was assembled out of thin air. Somebody moved cards. I watched a 19-year-old in a black vest pick up my mother's card from the head table with 2 fingers, the way you handle something you have been told to handle, and carry it down to table 14 by the side door. The captain went and spoke to my mother. I could not hear it. I watched her listen with her chin up. She smiled at him the entire time. Then she gathered her clutch and her wineglass and walked to table 14 and sat down with her back very straight, next to a man from the church who does the soundboard, and she did not look at me. Not then, not for the next hour. Somebody was sent to fetch me. I was walked up the length of that room in the other direction, past the same 18 tables, and people touched my arm as I went, and a man I did not know said, "Thank you for what you do," in the voice people use at funerals. They put me in a gold chair at the head table with a linen napkin, between Sloane and a woman from the club, with a fresh plate coming out of the kitchen. And I am going to tell you the truth, because there is no point to any of this if I lie about the middle. For about 11 minutes, it felt wonderful. It ended with a handshake. A man leaned across the corner of the head table with his hand out and said his name, Don Beaudry, and said, "We'll see you on the 21st. He said it warmly. He meant it as a gift. Don Beaudry sits on the board of directors of Ashford Regional Medical Center, and so does the woman across from him in the gray jacket, and both of them had just watched their chair walk the length of a ballroom to tell 200 people that she owes me her husband's life. Beatrice put her hand on my forearm, friendly, pleased with the evening. "I called Ray in September," she said. "Ray is our chief executive. I only told him the truth about you." I sat there in a gold chair with a fresh plate in front of me, and I heard my entire future get quietly ruined by a kind woman with a glass of wine. Nobody in that exchange did one single thing wrong. That is what I could not get past. Not one person at that table had a bad motive. And on the 21st of October, whatever happened in that boardroom, there would now be exactly 2 versions of it in the world. Either Grant Whitlock gets it, or I get it because the chair of the board owes me. Every nurse in the trauma bay would know the story by Thursday. Weddings leak. There is no version of that vote left that belongs to me, and there never would be again, and it had taken about 90 seconds to happen. I put my fork down for the second time that night. The old road, the clean one, the one where the work is the argument, was gone. I asked her if we could step out. The corridor at the Grove runs along the old loading side of the mill, brick on one side, coat racks and a folded easel on the other, and it is the only quiet place in the building. She came willingly. She thought we were going to have the conversation where I thanked her. "I hope that wasn't too much," she said. "I've never been able to sit on a thing like that." And then, because she is a direct woman, she gave me the true sentence, the one under everything she had done that night. "I've been trying to pay you for 3 years." I looked at her in that brick hallway, and I finally understood the shape of the evening. She had not been giving me a gift. She had been putting down a weight. 3 years of a debt she could not discharge, and tonight she found a room with 200 witnesses in it and she set it down, and she genuinely believed she was doing it for me. And I understood, at last, why an envelope had been sitting in my locker since that spring, unopened, through 4 locker cleanouts. Because opening it meant being someone who receives. My whole life is arranged so that I am the one who gives, and it is not generosity, it is a fortification. And I built it around myself so carefully that a woman in a navy dress could not get a thank you card past it in 3 years. I said, "Then stop trying to pay me." She did not understand. She started to answer, kindly, the way you answer a person being modest. The corridor door opened. My mother came through it. Beatrice read the room in about a second and said she would give us a minute, and went back in, and then it was my mother and me, and a rack of 200 coats. She was not angry the way I expected. She was worse than angry. She was flat. She stood there in the dress she had bought in July and she said, "In 1983 my sister Carolyn got married at the Elks Hall in Dunmore." I did not say anything. I was 21. I was supposed to be maid of honor. Roy left me in April. She said the name the way you say a street you no longer drive down. By the time they did the seating, I wasn't a couple anymore, and there was a math problem. So they put me at a card table by the kitchen doors with the 2 cousins who were still in school, and Aunt Dell, who was deaf. 4 hours. Steam on the back of my neck every time somebody came out with a tray. She looked at the coats. Nobody walked across that room for me. Not one person got up. And for the first time in 35 years I saw my mother, all the way down, the whole machine of her. And I want to tell you what it felt like, because it was not triumph. It was grief. She had been the girl at table 19. Every beautiful capital letter she has ever drawn at that dining room table, 16 years of weddings and charity dinners and church suppers, every chart, every card, every 9 minutes spent on somebody's initial, was a woman making absolutely sure she would never again be the one being seated. She would be the one holding the pen. I felt something in me start to open toward her, and then she closed it herself, in one breath, without even noticing she was doing it. "So I made sure I was never on the wrong side of a chart again," she said. "You could have done the same thing. All you had to do was bring somebody. Anybody. I asked you 3 times. Her voice came back up into its normal pleasant register, and she straightened the coat rack, and she said, "Now go back in there and be gracious. And don't you dare ruin your brother's night with whatever this is." Not sorry, not once. She did not think she had done anything to me. She thought she had shown me the rules, the way you show a child the stove. And out in the ballroom, over the sound of 200 people getting their dessert, the MC's voice came up on the microphone and said that the groom's sister, the doctor, was going to say a few words. Nobody had asked me. That is how those rooms work. Somebody decides you will be delighted. I walked back in, and 200 people applauded a woman they had spent the last hour learning about, and I took the microphone, and I could feel exactly how the next 90 seconds were supposed to go. I was supposed to be humble. I was supposed to say it was a team, and that anyone would have done the same, and thank you so much. And then sit back down in the gold chair and let the evening close over the whole thing like water. I have a low voice and I did not raise it. I said, "Thank you. I'd like to say 2 things and then let you get to the cake." I said the first one to Walter Vance, who was in the second seat from the end with his hand still flat on the tablecloth. I told him that the night they brought him in, he woke up in the bay for about 40 seconds before we took him upstairs, and that he did not ask about himself. He asked whether somebody had gotten the dog out of the truck. I said that in 14 years I have not had a better answer to what a person is. Walter put his hand over his eyes, and his daughter put her arm around him, and the room made a sound. Then I said the second thing, and the room did not make any sound at all. I said, Mrs. Vance chairs the board of directors of Ashford Regional. On the 21st of this month, that board votes on whether to ratify me as trauma medical director. There are 2 other board members in this room, and I'd like them to hear this too. Don Beaudry set down his glass. I'm asking Mrs. Vance to recuse herself from that vote. I'm asking the board to decide it with people who have never heard tonight's story. If that can't happen, I'll withdraw my name and reapply next cycle. Somebody at table 6 said something and somebody shushed them. I looked at Beatrice, who had gone very still. You told me an hour ago that I don't know who I am in this room, I said. I do know. That's why I'm going to sit back down. And then I said the only part I had thought about in advance, out in that corridor, and I said it to the room, and not to her, because it was not an accusation. I've spent 14 years making sure that nothing I have was given to me, not the residency, not the fellowship, not one day of it. It's the only thing I own outright. I'm not trading it for a nice night. I want to be clear that this cost her something too. She had walked across that room to settle a debt, and I had just told her, publicly, that she could not settle it, and that the only way to honor what she felt was to give up the one lever she had. She stood there a long moment. Her jaw worked once. Then Beatrice Vance, who chairs a board and does not lose arguments, looked at me down the length of the head table and gave me a single nod, and did not say a word, and that nod cost her more than the speech had. I set the microphone down on the linen. And then, instead of sitting in the gold chair they had brought up for me, I bent down and picked it up by the back rail. A Chiavari chair weighs about 9 pounds and the legs are thin, and the floor at the Grove is 1902 hardwood, so it does not glide, it talks. I carried it down the length of that ballroom, past 18 tables, the same 18 tables, in the other direction, and every person in that room watched me do it and nobody said a thing. Here is what I was thinking on the way, and I have never said it out loud before. I became a trauma surgeon because in that one room nobody asks who you belong to. There is no chart on an easel. There is a person on a table, and there is the question of what is bleeding. And your worth for the next 2 hours is exactly equal to your usefulness, which is the most restful arrangement I have ever found, and I had been mistaking it for a personality. For 35 years I had been running my own family like a resuscitation. Move fast enough, be good enough, pay enough, carry enough, and I could save it. But you cannot triage people who have not agreed to be treated. And there is no amount of useful that turns into a seat. I set the chair down at table 19 next to Mabel Doyle, and I said, not loudly, I'd like to finish my dinner where I started it. That is when my mother lost it, and she was the only person in that ballroom who raised her voice. She said my full name, the whole thing, the way she used to say it up the stairs. Prudence Ann, what in God's name do you think you are doing? 200 people turned to look at her instead of me, and I watched her feel it happen, which was the worst thing that happened to her that night, and I did not do it on purpose. I answered her in the voice I use at 2 in the morning with families. You told me a table is just a list of who's real. Take my name off yours. I've got one now. Then I sat down with the 7-year-olds. Mabel reached over and stood the place card up next to my plate, the one with the red crayon on the back. Mabel Doyle. Trauma doctor. And turned it so it faced me. About a minute later, Walter Vance came down the room with a plate in his hand, and he did not make a speech. And he did not sit down. And he did not say anything at all. He put a piece of his daughter's wedding cake in front of me on the paper tablecloth and squeezed my shoulder once and walked back. The board met on the 21st. Beatrice Vance recused herself and it went in the minutes. They ratified Grant Whitlock, 7 votes to 1, and my chief called me at 4:40 in the afternoon to tell me before I heard it in a hallway. He said, "You made that a lot harder than it had to be." I said, "I know." He asked if I wanted to talk about the next cycle and I said in 2 years, "Sure." And then I hung up and changed into scrubs, because I was on that night. At 11:50 we got a 3-car pileup on the interstate, 2 of ours plus a transfer, and I stood in that bay for 5 hours and ran it. I lost the stipend. I lost the protected time and the office with the window and the seat in the room where they decide how this county lives and dies. And Grant is doing a decent job. And some nights that is a stone in my shoe, and I am not going to pretend otherwise. But nobody in that trauma bay on the 21st asked me who I belonged to. They asked me what I wanted done, and they did it. And a man named Arturo Salas went home to Bell Ridge 9 days later with a cane. I have thought about it a great deal since. I gave up a title so that the title would still be worth something if I ever got it. That is either integrity or a very expensive kind of pride, and I have decided I do not need to know which one it was, because I would do it again the same way, at the same table, in the same dress. In the first week of November, an envelope came from my mother. Inside was a seating chart for Thanksgiving, hand-lettered, the good nib, 14 names. Mine was at the adults' table by the window, in her most beautiful hand. There was no letter. I sat with it on my kitchen counter for 2 days, because it is the closest thing to an apology that woman has ever produced, and I know what it cost her, and I also know exactly what it was. It was a better seat from the same hand. I called her on a Sunday. I said, "Thank you. The lettering is lovely." I said, "I am not coming." And I said, "When you want to see me and there is no chart involved, call me and I will drive up." She said, "Well." Then she hung up, and we have not spoken since, and it has been 10 months. Danny texted 4 days later. I should have said something. I wrote back and told him yes, he should have, and then I asked him to get coffee in December, because I am not a burner of bridges, I am just done paying tolls on them. We went. It was awkward and fine. And I finally opened the envelope in my locker, years late, and it was 1 page and it said thank you, and it asked nothing of me. I wrote Beatrice Vance back the same week. 1 line, no favor attached. I still don't have a +1, and my mother still letters the prettiest seating charts in Cedar Hill, and Cedar Hill still cares who is sitting where. But there is a place card propped against the salt shaker on my kitchen table, written in red crayon by a 7-year-old who has informed her mother that she intends to be a trauma doctor. And after 35 years, I have finally learned that the only chair nobody can move you out of is the one you carried there yourself. That's my story. 1 name card, 18 tables, and a chair I carried back myself. If you have ever been seated somewhere that told you what somebody thought you were worth, hear this. You do not have to accept a better seat from the same hand. You are allowed to pick your own. If this reached someone you know, send it to them. Drop a comment, hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.